Hello again. Got a little announcement. I've hit the 100 subscriber mark. I really appreciate it. I know it's not a vast number in the great scheme of things, but considering I haven't had this going so long, and the kind comments and I really appreciate it. So, cheers from Sweden. I am now continuing. This is part 2 of the last video about routing and buses and send effects, etc. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, so this might go on a little bit. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can, but you know me. I received a couple of comments last week. One from, hang on, I've got his name here on my thing. Baseman Fallon. Yeah, Baseman Fallon doesn't understand the need, or doesn't see the need to go to the trouble of putting in buses and bus tracks, etc., etc. And hey, I mean, if you can work a certain way, all good. It's all good. There's no rules. I'm not trying to force people to do things a certain way. I'm just going to explain why I do it, and we'll go from there. So, I mean, maybe you might find some of this useful. Maybe you might not, I mean, it all depends on how you work and what you're using and what you're recording, etc. So let's get into this. We've got this track up here. It's another download from the Cambridge MT site for multi-track files. And it's a bit of a rock track. Now, all I've done for the moment is I've kind of done a rough fader mix. I've sorted it all out in its buses and all the rest of it. So they've got the bass bus, the guitars bus, vocals, etc. and my return effects. I've sent the vocals to a few effects just so I can go through some of those questions that I was asked. So I'll just kind of set this up enough that it doesn't sound terrible, and it answers some of the questions that people have been asking, and it goes through what I want to go through. Now, let's get into the buses first and why I do this. I've got going on here, I've got 2 buses here. I've got a drum master, which is where all of these drums end up, and I've got a drum bus, which is kind of an initial bus. Now, the reason for this is my kick and snare, I am using a parallel compression track here that they are getting crushed in, and that's getting mixed in with it. Now, this drum bus, the whole drum kit, I'm going to send to another parallel compression track that will compress the whole kit, and I'll mix that back in. But I don't want the kick crush or this tom verb included. So I've got a drum master, so the kick crush and this verb and any other parallel individual parallel compression tracks that I use will get sent out to this drum master, and we'll skip the drum bus. So then it's only the actual drum shells, if you like, that are getting sent to this other New York compression all as one big thing. So this is one of the reasons why I'm using a drum bus, is because I want to send the kit as a whole to another New York compression track, and that'll give us a bit more of a powerful sound. I like to think drums are one instrument. Okay, you need to use a lot of microphones to record them, but it's still one instrument. You could take a piano. I mean, you could use 5 or 6 mics to make up a piano, but it's still one instrument. Same a Hammond organ with a Leslie speaker. You're talking minimum 3 microphones there. So, this is not an unusual thing. But, I don't know, people tend to look at a drum kit and look at it as individual parts, when in actual fact it's one instrument. So I always like, if it's one instrument, I like to end up at one track, so that I can control that instrument overall. I can EQ it, I can, for example, on my drum master, I've got an EQ that goes across the whole kit, and it's just a high and low boost, just to bring a bit of beef and life into it. And, I can't do that on individual tracks. You just can't. I mean, I can put that, oh, sorry, banging the microphone. I can put that EQ on every drum track. It doesn't sound the same. Don't ask me why, it just doesn't, because you're boosting with that EQ, if I do that on every track, I'm boosting, what, 8 or 9 times. Whereas that volume will build up over those 8 or 9 times with all those boosts. Whereas I put it on one track, I'm only boosting, what, 3 dB on the bass. It will only be 3 dB on the bass. If I put it on the individual tracks, it will be 3 dB times however many tracks I've got in my thing that I'm using this EQ on. So that's my first reason, is so that I can work with the individual instrument as a whole. So that's why I put my drums in a bus. And it's the exact same reason for everything else. Now you may ask, you've got a bass track, why am I sending that into a bass bus when there's only one track? Well, I'm not happy with that bass. I want to duplicate it. I may put some amp effects or amp sims on one of the tracks and use the other one as a DI and blend them, mix it back in, put some distortion on one of them and keep a clean bass. Any number of things. I mean, I haven't actually started mixing this track. This is just initial setup stages and some rough sends so that I can let you hear what it is I want to talk about. So that's why I do that, and I just do that automatically, and you know, it's there ready for when I want to do whatever I want to do. Or if I don't, it doesn't matter. It's just there ready. Guitars. Okay, you can say you've got 2 guitars, but it's still these instruments that I want to affect together. I want to maybe cut out some mid-frequencies to make room for the vocals, so it's easier to do that over a bus track and just one EQ, cut out a little bit of mid-frequencies to let the vocals come through, or lift some highs and lows, etc. And in this case, I'm using my Aphex, and I'm using like an H3000 effect just to create some width and space, and I'm sending all the guitars to those effects, so I get that effect over the whole thing. Vocals, the lead vocal, yeah, okay, there's only one lead vocal track, but once again I may duplicate that and do some different things to create a fake double effect, or you know, whatever. I haven't got into it yet. So automatically I just send that to a bus, and backing vocals for the exact same reason as the guitars, so that I can work with them all as one thing. And then we're down to my return effects. Now that's my thinking behind why I use buses. What we'll do, if we solo the drums, I'll have to solo my mic so I don't disappear. So if we solo out the drums, and we can give it a listen. And what I'll do is I'll take this EQ off, and I'll bring it back on, and you can see the difference it'll make to the overall kit. But this is the overall kit. Now, bear in mind, I've worked a little bit on the kick and the snare so that I'm happy, but the rest of it I've done nothing other than just a bit of level matching, so just bear in mind. So if we give it a listen, let's see what we got. Now if I bring in the EQ now, now you heard there, apart from the boost to the bottom and the high frequencies, there was a volume boost because I'm boosting on this EQ. I mean, if we look on the bass end, I'm boosting by 3 dB. On the top end, I'm boosting by 6.5 dB. Now, if I was to put that on every single track, I'd have to turn them all down, and that changes the balance. It changes how much is getting sent to my bus track, or it changes how much is getting sent to any parallel compression, because if I turn these down, the amount going to my parallel compression comes down, so then I've got to raise that. You know, there's certain things, it's a lot easier in my world to balance it within a bus and use the bus as my kind of master fader for it. So if I need to turn all the drums down, I can just pull down that one fader, and it won't affect, if I've got anything getting sent from individual tracks within the buses, it won't affect them because they'll still be getting sent to the sends at the same volume. So that's my part 1 of this part 2 video on the buses. I hope it makes sense. I'm going to put a link up. There's a good friend of mine now called Peter Byrne, I think you pronounce it, who's been contacting me, and he's done a video that shows you with a flow chart kind of what I'm talking about here. So what I'm going to do is he's going to put it up later and send me a link. So I'll put a link in the description to his video. It's a really, really good, really clear way. It's so much clearer than my rambling on. So yeah, you should check it out. He's a good guy, and yeah, give it a look when I put the link in. This is just a little sketchy songwriting thing that we're doing with a partner I work with on a little electronic duo that we do. But this isn't an actual finished song or anything, it's just a little template. So just to give you an idea of how I think about, we'll concentrate on the vocals, how I think about the send effects in terms of my vocals. I'm not going to go into the effects I put on vocals, but just my thinking behind the send effects. So I've got here, these are just a template that I have. In fact, I've got a button here called Return Effects. I just click that and all of these tracks will open up with all the effects switched off, and I just switch them on as I go, as determining what I use. Now in terms of vocals, first thing I'll listen to is, does it sound as though they're really close to the mic? Is the room that they're singing in really dead? What do I need to do to liven it up? I mean, this is in terms of the send effects. I'll have EQ'd it and everything first, and then I'll go on to this. So I talked about before the Fab DuPont method of the multiple reverbs to create a space. Well, I've kind of been going off reverbs a little bit lately, and I'm switching over more to trying to use delay to create my space and effects, because I find it's easier to control, especially the longer tails. I just find it a lot easier to control than a washed out hall reverb. I mean, I will use reverb as well, but in very smaller amounts than I used to. And what I'll do here is I'll go to my delays first. So my first protocol, let me just get my delays up here. I'm going to mute out all of the delays, all of the sounds, sorry here. Okay, now I've got my controller in front of me, so if you watch up here, you can see I'm muting them on my controller. I'm just switching them on and off. So this is the vocal dry. So if we play a little bit of it, and I'll start to go through some of the thinking behind what I'll do next.
This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white.
So it's not too dead. I know where she sings this, so I know the room she's sung it in, but I mean, sometimes you'll get stuff coming to you don't know. I'll give you an example. I'll put The Office on and you can see the difference that it makes in terms of just giving it a little bit of space. I'll turn it down, I'll switch it in, and I'll just bring it up slowly.
This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and...
You could just hear that the room gets bigger, there's more space around her, and that's all I'm trying to do there, is just to create that sense of space. I'm going to leave it out for the moment because I'm going to show you my next one that I've got. I'm kind of moving over to this one, and I've got a stereo delay here, and I've got an EQ before it, and I'm just high and low passing a little bit, and just to concentrate on the middle section here. If I open up the delay, I've got it set to left and right mode. So if you notice on the left hand side, sorry, I've got about 92. On the left, I've got about 165. Now this varies song to song. You can use delay charts, or I just kind of play around with it till it feels good, you know. So I've got some feedback here as well. Now what's going to happen is that the difference in the delay times between the left and the right side are going to create my early reflections for, a kind of a way of creating your own early reflections without actually doing it with reverb. And it gives the illusion of early reflections anyway. And the feedback just gives a little bit of a tail. So I depending on how big I want the room to be, I can adjust the feedback up and down. So let's just play it, and I'll bring that one in. If we just select the vocal again. Where are we? Yeah. And I'll bring it in, and I'll turn it down, I'll put it on, and we'll bring it in slowly.
This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white.
I mean, I've exaggerated it there, but you can hear how I could adjust the size of the room with the feedback, and it gives more of an instantaneous feel. The reverb one is a little more subtle than that. I mean, I could obviously I would pull back on it. I'm exaggerating it so you can hear. But right, let's go on to the next one. So my next in line is I've got a vocal delay here. I call it my vocal delay. It's actually a multi-tap delay, and there's a lot going on. I never change these settings, so if you've got this delay and you want to copy it, I'll leave it up for a second and you can copy the settings. I copied them from another famous producer, mixer, I can't remember. It was years ago I did this. And I've just stuck with it. Now this creates my kind of longer delays, but again I've got the EQ just kind of high and low passing. And I've got rear comp on after this. Now I've actually sent the vocals as a side chain into this compressor. So you do a send, here it is, here, the vocal delay is sent into the vocal delay, but you send it to channels 3 and 4. And then on the compressor, you select auxiliary left and right, and that is inputs 3 and 4 basically. So my vocal will now come into here, and it's the vocal that will trigger the effect, the compressor. And the thinking behind it is that when the vocalist is singing, the delays are compressed. But when she stops singing, the compressor lets off and the tail can ring out. Because otherwise when she's singing, you start tripping over the words. I'll let you hear it with the compressor in and out. Okay, so I'll play it and we'll bring in the second delay slowly. I'll just turn down the tape delay a little. Our tape delay is off actually, I don't want that on. I'll just bring this in.
This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white.
I'm going to bring in the compressor now.
This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is.
So you can hear that when the compressor was coming in and out, it was, holding back the delays while the vocalist was singing, and when I took it out, she was like tripping over her own words. I hope you could hear that. That's it. I mean, obviously these are way over exaggerated so you can hear them, but if I feel that I want to add a little bit of reverb to that, I may choose to send the stereo delay to the hall reverb or something. instead of sending the vocal into it, I may do something like that, or send that multi-tap delay into a reverb. I mean, my last, well, I've got a couple of things more. We've got my effects, which you know about from the last video. It's I'll show you briefly what it is. It's re-EQ, cutting everything under 5k, and then I've got this free head crusher by Audio Assault. A lot of drive, a little bit of low cut, and that gives the same effect as the Waves FX does, and you've got more control because I can control what frequency is getting sent into the head crusher, and I can control how much crush that I put on it. So if we bring that in, and I'll bring it up. Now, as I explained in the last one, this is my way of adding high frequencies, by creating harmonics up in the high frequencies. And it, you know, if I can avoid putting an EQ on and just boosting the high frequencies of the vocal, I'll use this instead. You know, I might use EQ as well, but this just gives a nice effect. So if we play it and bring it in.
This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white.
So you can hear that instantly. Now my last and by no means least effect, I want to create a kind of slapback, little bit of width, body to the vocal. So I've got a little micro shift on here on setting 3, totally wet. So if we bring it in, and I'll play it and bring it up.
This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in.
So that's, you know, that's how I think about what I'm using in terms of delays and what I would do with a vocal. I mean, it follows for everything else, really. I mean, a lot of these quarter note delays, etc., I kind of got there in case I want to use them for kind of effects or whatever. And in terms of when it comes to like reverbs, I mean, I've only got a plate and a snare plate on there. I've got a hall reverb on here as well. And I would tend to send one of the delay tracks to the reverb rather than, I mean, let's do that now quickly. If we send this multi-tap delay into the hall reverb, and I'll switch it on, and then we can hear that. We just bring it in slowly.
This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life in black and white. This is life in black and white, black and white. This is life.
So it just gives you that really a much bigger effect. I mean, you could send that into plates or whatever you want to send it into, you know, but that's how I would tend to think next. I wouldn't send any more from my vocal to any reverbs. I'd then start thinking about sending within my send effects, which, I mean, don't ever think you can't do that. You can send whatever you want from here to anywhere in here, you know. There's no rules, no limits. So that's it, folks. I mean, I hope it's made sense. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. I hope it's helped. I hope it maybe gives you some ideas yourself. And like I said, don't be afraid to experiment. Send effects to effects and etc. You know, put buses wherever you want. Group track, different tracks, you know. And just enjoy it. What can I say? So we'll leave it at that. So please, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, tell your granny. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, folks. Bye now.